On Saturday, October 25th, 2025, the Little Long Lake Watershed Association held a special meeting for review of our Tier 2 Aquatic Survey, presented by Scott Banfield of Aquatic Enhancements. The recording begins with the agenda and a discussion of the reason to have a Tier 2 survey in 2025 as a follow-up to the previous year.
All right, here's today's agenda. We're going to talk about the purpose of even looking at or talking about aquatic plants. Talk about what's been done this season as far as monitoring the plant community. Go into the general nature of non-native invasive aquatic species. We'll talk about the specific invasives that you guys have present in Long Lake. Go over the results of the plant community. What did it look like in the past season? And I'll outline some recommendations and then take any questions you have. And feel free at any time, if you have a question, to go ahead and raise your hand, and we'll take those as they come up. Okay? So I'm curious, what did you guys think of the level of plant growth in the current season? Did a lot of you think there wasn't very many plants? Didn't seem like there was very many plants in the lake? Just give me a show of hands. Not very many plants. How many of you thought that there was too many plants? Okay. Next slide. Like anything else, plant management in lakes, lake management in general, is needs-based. The lake takes care of many needs for us: aesthetic needs, recreational needs, exercise, fresh air. We boat, we swim, we fish. Maybe even get food from the lake if we fish. Next slide. So what's been done so far? We did a summer Tier 2 survey. I'll talk about that a little bit more in a minute. We were going to do summer invasives mapping. This is where we go out and we look at what parts of the area, how much of the lake has been colonized by the non-native species. We skipped that this year because there were so few plants in the lake. So why are aquatic plants important? There's a few different reasons they are important. Cover. Cover for fish. Fish use aquatic plants for cover the same way that terrestrial animals might use the woods for cover. Our fish spawn, and then when the fry hatch, they need a place to hide so they don't all get eaten by the predator fish. So you want a moderate amount of plant cover so that the young fish have a place to hide, and then they can stay in the plant cover, or it might be woody cover, other types of cover. But you need cover in the lake for them to avoid predation. And what happens is they can get to a certain size where they're less liable to be eaten by bigger fish, and they can reach what we call recruitment, to where they're going to make it to adult size on the fish. We don't want too much cover in the lake. We don't want the lake completely choked out with plants, because you do need some predation on your young fish. But if you don't have any plants at all, they're going to get eaten back to a degree that you don't want, and that can really affect your fish population. So they're important for cover. Plants give off oxygen. They do the opposite of what we do. We take in oxygen, we breathe out CO2. This is respiration. But plants produce oxygen. They take CO2 out of the air, and they end up cranking out oxygen. Aquatic plants do the same thing. So a lot of the oxygen that you have in your lake in the summertime is coming from plants that are in the lake releasing oxygen. The fish need that oxygen. They have gills that act like our lungs do, and they breathe water across those gills, and the gills will take out oxygen for them to use in their system. Same thing with aquatic insects, same thing with things like crayfish. Many of the creatures in the lake need oxygen in that water, and the plants help put oxygen in the water. Plants are important for water clarity. If your only goal was water clarity, you would want every plant possible in the lake. Lots of plants means clearer water. And there's a few different reasons for this. The lake has zooplankton in it, which are tiny animals that swim in the water column. And if any of you fish for crappie at night where you hang a light over the water, you will see these zooplankton come up underneath your light. They're attracted to the light, and they will get, after an hour or so, so thick under that light at night in the lake that it just looks like a soup, like a churning soup of zooplankton under that light. These animals live in the water column. Most of them will prey on algae, which is tiny plants that float in the water column. And algae is the primary thing that clouds the water. So if you have a healthy zooplankton community, the zooplankton are eating the algae and you have a little bit clearer water. If you don't have any cover, same thing as with the small fish, if these zooplankton don't have any cover in the lake to hide in, then they get preyed on by fish and their numbers can get knocked back to almost nothing. And now the algae is more free to grow and cloud the water. So we want to have plants as habitat so our zooplankton also have a place to hide. We want to strike a balance. We want some of the zooplankton to get eaten, not all of them. Sediment stabilization is an important function of plants in a lake. If you have plants in a lake, they have roots in the bottom, and they are dampening the functions of, or the influence of boats, current, disturbance from wind and wave. They're holding the soil on the bottom of the lake in place with their roots. And they're helping shield the lake from influences that would kick up sediment. And the reason we care about kicking up sediment, having sediment erode from the bottom of the lake, the reason we want a stable bottom of the lake and we want those sediments to stay there is every time sediments get kicked up, there's a nutrient exchange. Phosphorus is stored in the sediments. The phosphorus will come out of the sediments and into the water column, where it will spur the growth of algae and the lake turns green and the water is not very clear. A very disturbed lake, like a lake that has lots of carp in it that are always stirring up the bottom, or a lake that has lots of current that comes in and there's no plants there and it takes the sediment off the bottom of the lake. These are lakes that tend not to be very clear. So if you have plants on the bottom of the lake, they stabilize your sediments. You want to keep those nutrients on the bottom of the lake in place. You don't want them getting kicked up into the water column. That's another way that having lots of plants in the lake will contribute to clearer water and overall a happier lake. Yes?
In terms of the depth of water at which the plants can survive, I imagine that's a factor and part of how far the sun can penetrate.
Yeah, it all depends on light.
Feeds itself, then if you've got a cloudier lake, it's going to starve off those and see like a cycle.
For sure. Okay. On Lake James, Lake Pleasant, we find Cara, which is a type of plant that grows on the bottom of the lake, out to 30 plus feet occasionally. On a lake like Little Long, we might find plants to 7 feet, something like that. So it depends on the water clarity. Very clear lakes, we find the plants growing out pretty deep. Lakes that don't have any clarity, you might find no plants at all, or you might find them. I've seen lakes that where the plants stopped at about 4 feet. So it just depends on at what point or how deep the light is penetrating. Bottom of the lake, the parts of it that don't have any light, there's just nothing's going to grow because they have to have that light. It's what they use to do photosynthesis. It's what they use to make their food. Oh, wait a second.
Yeah, I bumped ahead, sorry.
Okay.
I was getting ahead of you.
So I want to talk about aquatic invasive species, why those are important. And they're important from the standpoint that they cause impairment. In different ways, they interfere with how happy we are with the lake. They interfere with those needs I was talking about before, aesthetics, recreation. They cause ecological impairment a lot of times. These are plants that have been brought in from someplace else, and they're put into a system that they didn't evolve in, that they're not used to. And sometimes these things, if we could see them growing in their native habitat someplace overseas, there would be predators that would eat them. There would be competitors that compete with them. There would be all these influences that hold them in place and keep them from growing like crazy. Sometimes these things, if you take them and put them into a different system, if they get into our lakes from overseas, they don't have those same predators. They don't have those same competitors, and they just go nuts. They grow like crazy. They can outgrow the native plants. They can sometimes grow fast in the spring, get up to the surface, grow laterally on the surface and form mats on the surface of the lake and cut out that light that the native plants use to grow. And so you can see reductions in native species, you can see reductions in diversity, and ultimately you could cause a degradation in the habitat. The cover that the fish use, the cover that the zooplankton use, they are used to native plant community. That's where they thrive. If you get a system that's choked out with non-native aquatic plants, they don't coexist with it as well. And so that loss of diversity, the potential ecological impairment, is one reason that we get concerned about the non-native invasives. Recreational impairment, where I was talking about they grow to the surface, form mats on the surface of the lake, or grow more thickly than the native vegetation does. It can be hard to get your boat through. It can clog up your swimming area. It can even make it difficult to fish. So from a recreational standpoint, there could be a lot of impairment. And then aesthetic impairment. Most people want to look out at the lake and see a nice blue surface of the lake. They don't want to look out and see a big soggy salad, aquatic salad out in the lake. They don't want to see mats on the surface of the lake so that it looks like you could walk across it. So which non-natives do you have in Little Long Lake? You've got either Eurasian or hybrid water milfoil, or maybe both. It might be a mix of both. I don't think we've done the genetic testing to sort it out, but Eurasian water milfoil has been in the United States since I think the 1950s, probably came in through the aquarium trade. If you have an aquarium and you want to grow plants in it, you need something that's easy to grow and is hardy, and Eurasian water milfoil foot the bill. So it was probably brought in to sell to people who are aquarium enthusiasts. And then it doesn't take much for somebody to just take their aquarium, dump it in a ditch out back, maybe the ditch flows to the lake, and now we have a reproducing population. And it continues to get spread from lake to lake, probably mostly on boat trailers. Someone backs their boat into the lake, they pull it back up out of the lake, go to a different lake, and they have plants hanging off the trailer, and now the fragments that fall off in that new lake can start a new population. Really common route of spread for this and other plants. Eurasian water milfoil has hybridized with one of our native milfoils, northern water milfoil, and now we see the hybrid of Eurasian and northern water milfoil just as often as we see the straight Eurasian water milfoil. The hybrid's becoming very common. It's a little tougher. If you go after it with herbicides, it's a little bit tougher to knock back than the straight Eurasian water milfoil. And I think that's why it's tending to dominate, and we see it more often, or just as often as Eurasian. Curly-leaf pondweed also probably came in through the aquarium industry, came in probably much earlier than Eurasian water milfoil, 1800s, this started showing up. It's very difficult to find a natural lake in this area that doesn't have curly leaf in it. I think it's made its way around to just about all of them. Starry stonewort is the newcomer to the lake. We found a mound of this growing last season. Did not find it this season, but this is a type of macroalgae. We think it came in through the cargo vessels that come into the Great Lakes system from the saltwater systems and other places overseas, because it was first found in the St. Lawrence Seaway, and then in Lake St. Clair, and then it began to wander its way, I think probably in the 90s or early 2000s, into southeastern Michigan in the inland lakes, and it has made its way down south of the border now and spread to most of our decent-sized lakes in this area. There are a few that still don't have it. Okay? This is what Eurasian water milfoil looks like. It's relatively easy to recognize, almost always single stalks that come up from the bottom. It doesn't branch very often. Once in a while you'll see it branching. If you look closely at these leaves, they look like this. They don't look like true leaves. They're just kind of a central leaf stem with filaments that come off it. Really common to see this in lakes around here. Almost every lake has this. Not every lake, but almost every lake. Its flowers look like that. Occasionally you can see these up above the surface. We do have native milfoils in this area. This is one of them right here. You can see how this has bare spots on the stem. The leaves are kind of flaccid. When you pull it out of the water, they tend to collapse or fold up. The native ones, not so much, especially this one, which is variable water milfoil. The leaves are very stiff, and it tends to sort of form this tube structure when you pull it out of the water. It looks a little bit different. Curly leaf pondweed looks like this. It's the first one up in the spring. It's a very early sprouting plant, and that gives it an advantage, I think, over a lot of the native vegetation. It has these curls to the leaves, and kind of like lasagna. Got an example of this, and Eurasian water milfoil. Beth, if you want to just pass those around, you can take a look and see what these look like. We've got them in jars. Next one. This is starry stonewort. This is the mill pond at Lake George. Starry stonewort tends to coat the bottom and form mounds on the bottom. Sometimes these mounds can get thick, 3-4 feet thick. In this case right here, it was probably 5-6 feet thick. This is out at Wall Lake. This is a rake that was probably tossed in about 9 feet of water and pulled in, and it's just a solid mass of starry stonewort. This is the one that's been making the rounds about the last 10 or 12 years. It's in almost every lake now. Some lakes it comes in, and if it does well, over the course of maybe 7 or 8 years, it tends to displace much of the native vegetation. You see your diversity go way down, and this plant go way up in occurrence. Some lakes this gets into, and it reproduces very slowly, and it takes it a long time to really take over the lake, and it's much less of a problem over time. It's got its habitat preferences. We haven't really figured out what they are, but some lakes it does much better than others in. This is what starry stonewort looks like, a handful of it close up, and you can tell it's starry stonewort for sure. If you pull it out of the lake, take a look closely, especially late in the season, you'll see these little starry structures. Those are called a bulbil. This is the reproductive structure, the seed of this plant. And what happens is this will come into your lake, it forms a cover over the bottom, kind of grows thickly on the bottom, and it's producing thousands of these bulbils. They drop off into the sediments, and there they stay. And they can produce plants next year, they can produce plants later this season. We can treat for this plant pretty effectively. We can come through and treat, knock it back, maybe get rid of it all the way for a month or a month and a half, but if it's been growing there very long, these bulbils have built up and they are ready to produce more starry stonewort, and our treatment doesn't affect them. So what happens is we're sort of stuck right now because we can come through, we can treat for this, it's a type of algae, so we can treat for it with copper products and different things that are effective on algae. We can knock it back, we can get it out of your way, make it less of a problem around your beach or your swimming area, but these bulbils are there and it comes back. Month and a half or so, it grows back. So you usually have to treat 2, sometimes 3 times a season. Yes?
So that is an algae?
It is an algae. It's what we call a macroalgae, and it's similar to a native one called Chara that I'll show you in a second, but it is a type of algae sort of looking like a plant. Yep. Okay. This is Chara. You have Chara in the lake. It is a native macroalgae. It is a relative of starry stonewort, but it is native. It behaves itself a little bit more. There's a couple ways you can tell the difference. This has, they call it musk grass. It has a musky smell, an unmistakable musky smell, especially in shallow water. So you can take a handful of this and you give it a sniff, and it will have a really spicy, musky smell to it, and the starry stonewort does not.
Our lake used to be dominated by that stuff.
Yep, lots of lakes around here have tons of Chara. You sort of get Chara in all the shallow areas of the lake, and a lot of them. The Chara, go back to that a second. The Chara has, you can see these nodes on here, these little spots where there's balls of vegetation. Chara has lots of those on it, many more than starry stonewort. And back up a second, we'll take a look back at the starry stonewort. See how the starry stonewort, it has nodes on it, but many less. You get a lot of sections where it's just this slender stem. Okay? Another way to tell this, Chara gets a really bristly feel to it because it calcifies. As it's carrying out photosynthesis through the summer, chemical processes take place that cause it to precipitate calcium out of the water column, and it gets coated with calcium. So when you pick it up, it has a really bristly feel to it, scratchy feel. The starry stonewort doesn't really calcify like the Chara does. It's another way to tell them apart. sort of taking a look at your Tier 2 survey results. The Tier 2 survey is a rake toss survey. We take a rake, which is basically just two garden rakes welded back to back with a rope on them. We toss that rake out, let it sink to the bottom of the lake, retrieve that rake, and then we quantify the plants that are on there by species. We do that at 50 points out here in the lake, and then what that's doing is taking a snapshot of the lake's plant community, and then we can take the data we get from that to get our statistical descriptions of the lake. What's going on with the different plant species in the lake. These are the sampling sites. We use the same sampling sites every year for continuity. Just taking a look, we started in 2023, we did a Tier 2. We had 5 native species. 2024, we're up to 7 native species. And this last year, we're down to 4 native species. Taking a look at Secchi depth, and this is a black and white disc that you lower down into the water to measure the water clarity. You're essentially lowering it down in and recording where it disappears. And how deep can you see it is the question that you're answering. It's a measure of water clarity. Back in 2023, we had 5.9 feet, almost 6 feet. 2024, we had 3 feet, and this year we were down to 2.2 feet on our Secchi depth. So that means that disc essentially is disappearing when it gets 2.2 feet down into the water column. In 2023, we had plants at 38% of those 50 sampling sites. 2024, we had plants at 32%, and this year we're down to 16%. 16% of sampling sites, which is the lowest that I've seen.
Native in all plants?
Yep, presence of any plants. We discount algae from this. We did get algae on quite a few rake tosses, but we don't count that in this figure. Just taking a look at 10 of my other client lakes, I just took them real quickly and averaged them to give you an idea where most of the lakes around here lie. We get an average of 10 native species out of those 10 surveys, or out of those 10 surveys. Secchi depth average is 9.9 feet, almost 10 feet. And we get plants on average at 76% of sites. You guys are way at the lower end. The least occurrence of plants that I've seen. Lake Gage is the only one that came close. I think we had plants at 22% of sites on Lake Gage. It just is not traditionally a very weedy lake. You guys are at 16% of sites. So very little plant cover.
And just to expand on that, we have a 2017 survey. We were at, I think it's 17 native species.
Wow.
And the plants, as far as sites, I think it was 47 out of 50 sites. So you can see the trend
what a huge change.
Yeah, from where we're at.
Next slide. So very low diversity. The lowest I've seen, I think I've had a lake that had 5 native species one year. 4 native species is the lowest. Very low water clarity. I don't see water clarities, that are under 3 feet. It's kind of rare in this area. If you go farther south in the state, it's not that uncommon, where you have sort of a different watershed regime, lots of agriculture, mostly reservoirs with creek systems running through and putting lots of nutrients in. But our glacial lakes up here tend to have relatively clear water most of the time, and very low plant coverage, like I said, 16%. Next slide. We got invasive water milfoil at 18% of sites in 2023, 14% in 2024, and then it did not occur in the survey this time. I was really surprised. Curly leaf pondweed did not occur this time. We did have it at 10% in 2023. Not unusual to not get curly leaf late in the season because it kind of does its thing, completes its life cycle, and generally drops out by about the 4th of July or so. So I wasn't really surprised to see that. Did not find starry stonewort in 2025. We checked in the same spot that we found it last year, and it wasn't there. It's there somewhere. I don't think it's gone for good, but we just didn't find it. So recommendations. It's a matter of water clarity. I mean, the reason that you had very few plants is correlated almost certainly with the water clarity. If you have a 2-foot secchi depth, or a 3 or 4 foot secchi depth, you're just not going to support the growth of very many plants. They aren't getting enough light for that plant community to thrive. And this comes down to work in the watershed or doing in-lake nutrient activation. Some of the things that you're already in the process of exploring and working towards. You've got to get better water clarity if you want a more luxuriant plant community. If you want that cover for the fish, if you want plants to stabilize the bottom, you've got to get the nutrient content of the lake down, which will lead to better water clarity. Less algae and better water clarity. Need light to penetrate. Limit plant control to the invasives. I mean, I'm almost ready to just say don't do any plant control. But if you have a relatively clear season, and you guys bounce around, some seasons or even some months seem to be clearer than others, you could end up with Eurasian water milfoil mats on the surface, that kind of thing. But at very minimum, be selective. If you want to do milfoil control, use something that's only going to affect the milfoil and not the other native plants. And you can do the same thing most of the time with curly leaf. If you get a lot of curly leaf up around your dock, you can come in early in the season before most of the native plants are up and do a treatment on the curly leaf and knock it down, and then the native plants will come up after that. Use the light that's no longer blocked out by that curly leaf. So on curly leaf, you use the timing to be selective. Eurasian water milfoil, there are broadleaf selective plant herbicides that are not going to affect most of the native plants. They're just going to hit the milfoil. So definitely, at a minimum, everything you do should be selective. We want to let the native plants come back to whatever extent possible. Or just don't do any plant control at all. And try to let even the invasives come in and provide some kind of plant cover.
And that's where we're at, was recommendation before, was to try.
This is
anything.
Copy right over from last year.
Anything is better than nothing to a certain extent.
Yeah, at least you'll have some cover.
Right.
You know, and I don't tell lakes that very often.
Right.
But if we got secchi depths under 3 feet, you know, it might be time to let some plant cover come back in. But at a minimum, you know, if you want to do some plant control, just keep it selective so you're not putting pressure on the native plants. And then just the impaired areas, you know, if you want to do plant control, maybe just your beach, just right at your dock. You don't have to get very far away to do the control that's needed. It's not to say you might have a weird season, the water clarity's better, and then you end up with all kinds of plants. Sometimes these things happen. We don't know exactly how every season's going to pan out, but definitely limit the plant control as much as possible. Yes?
I'm trying to work through like the cause and effect here, what builds on each other. But water clarity and depth. So at a shallower, right, we're going to have more chance for things to grow.
Absolutely, yes.
And so we're going to see the growth at the shoreline where most people notice it and personally then feel they want to get it out of there. So but that's a starting point towards growing the health of the lake. You keep taking it to what I'm trying to process through here. So if that is a foundation or a starting point for propelling more good things to happen, if we keep taking the starting point out of it, how do we get beyond that? Does that make sense what I'm asking?
Yeah. In theory, you allow more plants to grow. You stabilize the sediments. You give places for the zooplankton to hide, which can clear up the water. That is a piece of that puzzle, but it's not the only piece. There has to be outside nutrient sources flowing in from the watershed that are spiking the lake with enough nutrients to suppress the water clarity. The gizzard shad probably aren't helping. They're going to affect the zooplankton community, and other lakes, some other lakes that have gizzard shad have some of these problems as well. And then probably...
You think those other contributors outweigh any foundational growth in plant life at a shallower
Yes.
level?
Yeah. I doubt if there's been very many lakes that have been fixed, right, or water quality restored without doing work in the watershed. In some cases, doing nutrient inactivation in the lake. Because what happens is, over the years, you have all this phosphorus coming into the lake. It's causing algae to grow, and it builds up in the sediments. And sometimes during the summer, that phosphorus can get released from the sediments and cause algae blooms all summer long. So you have the water coming in from the watershed, and then you have nutrients that have built up in the sediments also being released into the
Do
lake.
you call it inactivation or neutralization?
Same thing.
Same.
Yeah, they're kind of used interchangeably.
Well, as I was starting to parse those terms in my mind, one is kind of extraction, the other is just like don't disturb. As your experience or what you've seen, how are those two things different? Extraction, is that possible versus non-disturbance, and how is
It
that?
sounds like you're describing distraction, like you put an item in the water and it soaks up the nutrients, and then you pull it out, so you're taking it out.
Any way to extract.
Yeah.
Right?
So then inactivation or neutralization, I guess, would be different than extraction, because it's staying there, but maybe you've got it bound up to substances that you dose the lake with, or you've got it staying in the sediments because you've put a layer of something that tends to bind to the nutrients on the sediments, and it's still there. So yeah.
It's a binding. Okay.
Yep.
Can you clear up a statement that I thought I heard you say, and that was the fact that if we don't do anything, do it ourselves? Did I hear you say that we should maybe take it on our own to treat our own beaches and areas?
No, that's not what I said.
Then I heard you wrong.
Okay.
Okay, that'll clarify.
I mean, you can do that.
We can't, Ken, because we're not licensed and qualified
No,
to
but you could hire somebody to just
kill
do ours.
in the state of Michigan.
On the Indiana side, they generally allow you to do up to 625 square feet, or half your frontage, whichever is less.
But in Michigan, you
On
cannot do
Michigan's-
anything other than a licensed, certified.
Yeah, I'm not familiar with
That's
what.
correct.
I'm not familiar with Michigan's
But
laws.
I thought I heard you say do it yourself.
No.
No.
Okay.
Yes.
What I'm trying to figure out is the last 2 years, it's been dry, very little runoff from ditches or wherever. But the water quality is getting worse.
Mm-hmm.
I don't understand that. If that's from agriculture or whatever, and we're not getting the rains to put that into the lake, why is our water getting more contaminated?
It may be that the lake is internally loading itself. So what I was talking about is that over the years, you have this phosphorus and nitrogen, these nutrients coming into the lake, and they build up in the sediments of the lake, on the
Right.
bottom of the lake. During the summer, you have no oxygen down there, and that creates a situation where sometimes those nutrients will come back up out of those sediments into the water column of the lake and cause algae to grow. So you've got the nutrients coming in from the watershed for many years, and probably, every year there's more nutrients coming in, but you also have lots of nutrients that have built up in the lake over time that can be released during the summer from the sediments and cause the lake to go into an algae bloom irrespective of how much rainfall you get. Does that make sense? So you've got these two sources of nutrients that can cause the water to be cloudy. It can run in off the watershed, or it can also come from the lake's own sediments and cause the lake to get cloudy. So you don't necessarily have to have all your nutrients flow in during rain events. Does that make sense?
That's getting stirred up. The bottom of the lake's getting stirred up because of no plant life? Or,
In the areas that I'm talking about, it's generally deep. And it doesn't necessarily have to be physically or mechanically stirred up. You can just have a release of nutrients coming from the sediments, and they diffuse up through the water column and end up in the upper part of the lake and cause an algae bloom.
So that happens naturally.
That happens naturally, and it's part of the.
It can.
It happens typically in the spring and then in the fall when we have the lake turnover. The fall turnover of the lake.
Well, in
We
the
get
fall, we're
some
not. In the fall, we're
mixing
not
of-
that concerned about it.
Right.
We expect a fall turnover, But that's at a time of the year when the
From
water's
from
cold.
an algae standpoint, I'm talking, that's when we've been seeing algal blooms on the lake, is when we have.
In the fall?
Yes, some
Okay.
significant algal blooms
Okay.
as the lake starts to turn over.
But these can also happen in the summer.
Correct.
And if you have a no oxygen condition, there's more likelihood that that exchange is going to take place. And that usually happens during the summer.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, it can happen at different times.
Scott, you had a question back there. Suzanne?
Well, that's what I was gonna ask, is what causes it, so if it's not something that we're doing, and it just happens naturally, then what do you do to, I know you can't prevent it, but what do you do then to, I don't know if treat's the right word, but, you know what I mean?
Well, my philosophy, the first thing you do is you limit the nutrients that come in from the watershed. That's how you take a long-term view of it.
But it was a dry year.
Yeah.
So we are limited.
Right, so.
Yep. But I'm talking about over the next 10 years, the next 20 years, the next 30 years. If you want less problems in the lake, you work on the watershed now. You're not worried about if you have a dry year or a particularly wet year, this year, next year, the year after. You need to cut over the long term the nutrients that are coming into the lake. Other than that, you can address the nutrients that are in your sediments right now with the extraction or the inactivation. There's different ways to do that. Those two things are the strategies you do for the nutrient reduction. You have other pieces of the pie, like I said, letting plants grow will help stabilize the sediments, help keep the water a little bit clearer. That's one piece of the pie, but the main thing is you have to look at the watershed, cut what's coming in every year. Okay? Others? Yeah.
If I understand what, our lake is spring fed from the bottom.
Okay.
Am I correct on that statement? Would that cause more of those nutrients to be released from the bottom of the lake? Is that part of the problem?
Maybe. I mean, that's possible. Usually spring water's coming in pretty cold. It's coming in the 50s. And I would guess if spring water comes in and it's in the 50s, probably the middle of summer on the bottom of the lake, you've got water that's in the 50s. So it might just stay on the bottom of the lake and not push nutrients up to the top. I haven't heard of that being an issue as far as turning a lake over and causing blooms. Lakes that are spring fed, and almost all of our lakes probably have at least some spring seepage. I think it's more of a gradual seepage and not usually an artesian situation where it's really causing the lake to turn over in the summertime. Most of our lakes have that spring seepage coming in, but they don't have a lot of artesian output that would do what you're talking about, in my experience. Does the lake ever stop running out the overflow? Are there times when the overflow goes dry?
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Then you pretty much know at that time that you have about zero spring water coming in.
Well, what question on that is with no rain and the heat that we had this summer, evaporation, am I correct?
Yeah, I mean, you could have a little spring water coming in and it's evaporating off the lake just as fast as it's coming in.
back in, so it's not
Yeah.
restoring itself, it's just evaporating, especially if you don't have any rain and it's dry, correct?
Hot weather makes a difference. Algae's going to grow better in hot weather, and you're more likely to have algae blooms and lower water clarity during a really hot summer. Just kind of the way it works. Was there another question? Yes.
I did, just stepping back a couple of minutes ago, a series of responses you gave, and it might be helpful to understand from your experience, your perspective, but there's not a quick fix. There's a need to have reasonable expectations about the amount of change and how much that change will stick over a period of 2, 3, 5 years versus 10, 15, 20 years. Is that?
Well, as far as a quick fix, you might be able to go out and do a nutrient inactivation on the lake, which is going to be an application probably in the deeper areas of something that binds phosphorus out. And within a week, you'd have much better water clarity. And you might get a year, 2 years, 3 years after that process where you have better water clarity. So you can do that quickly. The inactivation doesn't always work, but most of the time it does work. It can be very expensive, but it does work relatively quickly. It ties up the nutrients that are there. But I always tell people to take a long-term view and address everything you can in the watershed over the long term to keep the nutrients from ever coming in the first place. So I definitely recommend that long-term view. And from a financial standpoint, it's just not in the budget to do nutrient activation for a lot of lakes. So in that case, you just begin working on the watershed and try to cut those nutrients. Nutrients are going to find their way out of the lake whether you do an inactivation or not, if there's very little nutrients coming in from the watershed. They become deeply entrenched in the sediments. They become bound out to sediment particles or marl particles, calcium carbonate, or they flow out the overflow. So a lake does clean itself eventually if you cut off the nutrients that are coming in.
Would I be saying it correctly if I took what you just said, without maybe a significant financial investment for whatever the terminology you're using, deactivation, without that investment, we're not gonna see a quick step
Nope.
forward. It's gonna be very
Yep, it's going to be a gradual process over years.
years and years. Yeah.
Yep. Okay. Other questions? Yes.
I farm, but the USDA has monitors that they put in field tile that measures the nitrogen and the phosphorus going through that tile.
Mm-hmm.
Is that something that maybe look into or apply for to monitor nutrients coming into the lake?
Well, I mean,
And
we already
what
do-
nutrients are flowing
Yeah.
out of the lake? If we're receiving more nutrients coming in from the tile
Sure.
in the ditch,
Yeah.
we need to be getting rid of that much through the outlet.
Right, to not have a net gain.
Yeah, so you have a gain. Would that be something that,
We already are doing monitoring on the 2 tributaries that come into the lake
right,
3 times a season. We don't monitor the outlet, but nutrients leave in other ways besides going out the overflow. You've got some that go out the overflow, but also you've got marl that precipitates, or calcium carbonate particles that precipitate into the water column in the summer. Those bind a number of, some portion of the phosphorus out of the lake, pull it to the bottom where it's tied up permanently. So a lot of phosphorus leaves that way in addition to flowing out through the outlet. So I see limited utility to monitoring the outlet, but I would definitely monitor your inlets to see how much is coming in. There isn't much you can do about making more go out the outlet.
the last 2 years, it's been dry, nothing has really came in, so what's in the lake right now,
Gonna stay.
hasn't been fed
Yeah,
that way.
yeah.
I think our water level's down right around 12 inches right now, it looks like, just from the amount of beach I have in my duck poles,
Yep.
you know, so.
Just
I know
about
there's-
everybody's down right now,
Yeah.
that much or more.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Quite a few people even had problems getting their boats off the lifts this year to get them in the water to take out, so.
I believe it.
I just want to step in just for 1 second, because we're talking about stuff that we've been doing. The monitoring on the inlets, on the Durr and the Gurney, is done. Scott has done that for us this year. Previously, the shifters have been doing that. We did that in the off season. I'm calling it off season in November, December, January. So we talk about it being dry. You're talking about it being dry for 2 years. Like in the spring and fall, we have significant water flow that comes in at those points. In the summertime this year, it has been dry. So we know that we have phosphorus input as well as nitrogen, and we're also monitoring E. coli at those points. So I don't want people in here to think we haven't been checking that. We're aware that that's an issue, and it's definitely an issue, particularly more in our off season when we're not recreating in the lake, because we have traditionally we have a lot of fall rain, we have winter snow, and then we have a melt off in the spring, which is typically a load. So any of those times we've had phosphorus and these contributions coming in. So it's not like for 2 years we haven't had anything coming into the lake. Additionally, outside those known sources, all the activities that we do around the lake have an impact. So if we have septic issues, if we have other issues that are unknown at this point, all of those things impact everything. And all this kind of starts to tie together. One of the things that we're doing as part of this new initiative is the sampling that's going to be done out in the lake in 8 different points, is they're going to measure the phosphorus level in the sediment. That's going to answer the question as to what's going on from that and to the essentially to the stuff that Scott's talking about, where we can have stuff coming up out of the sediment. We don't know what those sediment levels are. We will know that shortly as Restorative Lake Sciences comes out and does those sample points for us. So that's going to start to answer that question. And again, we've talked about, and the board has talked about, we talked about here today, the idea of suppressing the nutrients into the lake sediment. That is definitely an approach. To Scott's point, it's an expensive approach to be able to lock that stuff in. The initiative that we've funded essentially at this point through our that we've raised through fundraising is essentially using filters that we're going to attach to docks and also to buoys throughout the lake. This is a different approach than suppressing. This is literally the filters being in the water. They're activated carbon. It'll pull phosphorus and nutrients and other items from the lake, and then we'll dispose of those filters at the end of the year. Again, we don't know the efficacy of what that's going to be. Again, some of that's going to be impacted by the level of nutrients we have in the sediments, where we get that transfer back and forth. But this is a cost-effective way, and it's been very effective in some lakes to have a pretty significant impact. And year over year, again, we'll be doing some analysis after this first year to see what those results are. And a big measurement of that is clarity of the lake. This whole year, we went between 2 to 2.5 feet of clarity all year long. And so that's why we're in a situation where we don't have vegetation out in the lake. To someone's point back there, they were talking about around the edges. I was out with Scott when we did the survey. If you're up along the shoreline, we have some diversity and we have some aquatic vegetation, but it's not out into the lake because we weren't getting sunlight penetration. So we talked about that activation zone. I really call it an active zone, is the area that we can actively grow plants was significantly reduced this year, way beyond what it was in 2024.
Yep.
So that's how all this stuff kind of plays together. So.
And they'll come back if the water clears.
100%.
For a while.
Yeah.
I mean, if it stays like this for too long, you'll start to lose that seed bank probably. But
right.
For a while, the plant community should rebound if you can clear the water up.
And again, going back, again, you do a lot of these, but I know because I've been involved in these. The 2023 survey to 2024, we had an increase. And if you look at the water clarity that year, if you remember in June, right around Memorial Day, we had about 3 weeks there where the water cleared up and everybody was excited because we could see about 10 or 12 feet down. And then we had whatever, the phosphorus and nutrients came back into play. We lost the clarity. And when we did the survey, we found a lot of plants that had started and essentially had died off in 8 to 10 feet of water. Mm-hmm. So to your point, if we can increase the clarity, we can start to have a pretty significant, quick turn to where we're getting in a positive direction. Mm-hmm. So,
did you say you had a tier 2 done before?
You did the 2023 and the 2024.
Yeah, but weren't you saying you had one done before that?
That's a historical one from that Indiana DNR did.
Okay.
That was part of a fish survey.
I'll get a copy of that. I'll contact them.
Yeah. But that was, I think that there was 17 native species and it was dominated by Cara is the main.
Wow.
So you can see obviously where we've slid to.
17 would definitely be at the upper end of what we ever see.
Yeah.
Yeah. Really unusual. Let's just see if there was any other slides. I think it's probably just and always monitor the water quality because At a minimum, measure your Secchi depth every season. If not every month, at least one summertime.
That's happening
measurement.
weekly through our Indiana Clean Lakes program initiative.
Okay.
The shippers do that.
Because I get a lot of lakes that contact me, and they say things are worse than they ever have been, and they want some help, and I look, and there's big gaps,
Yeah.
in the data, and I can't see. It's hard to discern a trend,
Right.
and it's really important to know if you're going in the right direction or the direction you don't like.
Yeah.
So,
Chris, I want some clarification on my thinking. I'm hearing that of the lakes that you work with, I don't know, 10, 12, it doesn't matter, but we're at the bottom of those results. So
in terms of water quality, yes.
So we're at the lower end of water clarity for a group of lakes that you work with.
Absolutely, yes.
And then I'm hearing you say about the nutrients coming in, if we can't shut those off, and the springs aren't able to do their natural thing, will you share what else we can do as a community on a lake if we're not stopping the nutrients from coming in? We're at the bottom of the barrel on our testing. Do you have something for us to hold on to that we can do in the meantime? I know the extraction has merit, but I don't want to put words in your mouth, but I keep hearing limit what's coming in from the watershed. So if those things are true, what can we do?
There's a couple things right off the top of my head. Don't use lawn fertilizers, or don't use lawn fertilizers that have phosphorus in them. In this area, most of our soils, you really don't need to use fertilizer, and certainly don't need fertilizer that has phosphorus in it. When you apply...
If neighbors are spraying Roundup all over, maybe that would be a point of communication from the...
Well, the Roundup I'm not so worried about as their fertilizer that they put on their lawn to feed their lawn.
Okay.
Because that contains nutrients, and you really, if you don't need phosphorus, it's just going to wash right off into the lake from the lakeside homes.
So we won't fertilize. What else?
Monitor your septic system.
Yep, I'm picturing your phosphorus budget, and your phosphorus budget is the pie that shows where all the phosphorus in your lake comes from. Some of it is airborne, comes in as dust. You can't really do much about that. If you have lakeside septic systems, do you guys have any centralized collection, or are you all on septic systems?
All on septic.
Probably a 5 to 7% of your phosphorus budget for your lake is coming from those lakeside septic systems. When your septic system operates as it should, your solids go into your septic system, your liquids, and then you have a drain field. Bacteria are in your drain field working hard, breaking down that sewage. Water flows out of your drain field, and it has phosphorus in it. Over the years, it will infiltrate through your yard. It goes through the sands and the gravels and eventually makes its way into the lake. On a lake like yours, probably 5%, 7% of your phosphorus budget is coming from lakeside septic systems.
And in the beginning, you said most of the phosphorus pie is from where?
Most of it.
Contributor?
The biggest pie slice generally is water coming in through your tributaries from the watershed.
Okay. All right, so then we can look at our septics.
Your septics, at a minimum, keep them working very well to minimize the phosphorus that's going into the lakes. Ideally, you get on a centralized collection system, and that works better at some lakes than others, but a centralized collection system takes out that 5 or 7% of the phosphorus budget right now, because you no longer have phosphorus coming from the septic systems.
Okay.
Now, a lot of times, that's just making it someone else's problem. It ends up going into a stream that your plant effluent goes into, but it gets it off your lake.
Okay.
Boom, that's a big pie slice that's gone. Internal loading can be a big part of that phosphorus pie, and that's what we've already discussed. There's ways to address that by doing applications of products on the lake to lock and tie up the sediments, the nutrients that are in the sediments, keep them in the sediments. Or the extraction would be another strategy to combat the internal loading. Operate boats in deep water so that you're not churning up sediments, which causes nutrient exchange.
And what is the footage? Is there a?
How deep do you need to be?
I don't, yes.
Our recommendation is 10 and 15 for,
Right, but I'm just curious as he's around what.
sure.
The,
Yeah, I mean, it depends on the boat, how much water your boat draws and how deep your outdrive is and that kind of thing. There's a couple studies going around on this now, but 10 feet, I would say, if you've got a ski boat or you want a water ski or something like that, 10 feet would be pretty good. You're probably not churning up the bottom.
And we're 15 on our wake boat activities.
Wake boats?
Yeah,
Okay.
which is a hot topic, obviously.
Yeah.
Across the United States right now.
Yep.
well,
I know.
I mean, the original question is like, what can we do? So the boating in deep water, the septics.
Yep.
Monitoring the,
Going along with keeping the sediments in place
yeah,
so you don't have nutrient exchange, you want nice, well-vegetated shorelines.
Shorelines,
You don't want waves coming in, striking seawalls, causing bounce back, which causes turbulence in the shallows and kicks up nutrients. If you have a seawall, you can reface your seawall by stacking glacial stone against it. That helps break the wave action up and causes you to put less nutrients back into the lake at your seawall.
okay.
If you've got erosion along your shoreline, addressing that can go a long way, especially if you're tying that down with plants. Taking care of eroded areas. Every time a shoreline erodes and the soil finds its way into the lake, that's bringing nutrients with it. There's no such thing as clean dirt. You want the dirt to stay on the landscape and be tied down with plants. There are ways to plant native plants along your shoreline and stabilize them so they won't erode. These tend to be kind of expensive, but they are beautiful. You get lots of wildflowers that way, and they stop the erosion, and they provide habitat. That's a way to cut nutrients to the lake. Specifically looking at the watershed, it's a matter of changing ag practices, enhancing or building wetlands to filter the water coming in, looking at the stream banks to make sure they aren't eroding and going down into the lake.
Okay.
I think that's pretty much the whole list for cutting phosphorus to the lake. I think I've gotten everything.
And of course, everybody knows changing the ag practices around the lake is virtually impossible.
Not necessarily.
Okay, that would be big for another conversation on
Sure.
how we could make an impact in a
Yeah.
communal way.
No, I mean, ag practices get changed all the time. There's a whole host of programs through soil and water conservation districts, through NRCS, where they will cut checks to a farmer to do something a little bit different. It's really common for this to happen. A lot of times I'll sign a contract with the Lake Association, I do what's called a lake diagnostic study,
Okay.
where we summarize for that particular lake a set of steps to work towards reducing their nutrient inputs.
Okay. A lake diagnostic study is
Yep.
something you could put together with all you know so far, or is it another step for you?
No, it would be about a year-long process where I would sit down and take a look at the watershed, walk the stream banks, talk to the farmers to come up with a specific set of recommendations that's tailored for your lake.
And we haven't had that done by you,
Not that I know of, not by me.
not by you or anybody prior to.
Yeah, not that I know of.
The only way it's been done in the past is for MDAR to go talk to the farmers via, I don't wanna say complaints, but concerns that we put with MDAR, they go, it hasn't moved, so I'm wondering, and this might, again, if you want me to be quiet, I will, but this lake diagnostic study, would that further the leverage? Who's gonna listen to this if they haven't listened to?
Often what it does is it says, here's the data, here are the maps, here's a specific set of recommendations. Sometimes it opens you up to obtain grants based on your findings. But it depends. I mean, it varies in Michigan. From Michigan to Indiana, there's different types of grants that are available. But that's what it does sometimes, is it opens you up for more funding. In addition to just having the knowledge, you know, about what steps to take.
And then we have a lot of Amish nearby, and a lot of these cattle farms that have been popping up. I don't understand if they are regulated, or would that come into effect with if you would do that case study thing?
Yeah, it would. I mean, that's something that would be addressed. There typically aren't very many regulations, you know, that restrain farming in terms of water quality. There are some. There are some that apply to CAFOs and so forth.
Or ours are too small for the CAFO regulation, but that's for another discussion.
Yep.
Is there anything we can do at our entrances to stem what's coming in?
You mean where the water comes in the lake?
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, you can build wetlands that apply filtration to the water and attenuate it before it even makes it to the lake. It's a common step in diagnostic studies, is to recommend restoring or building wetlands.
Are some of what we're looking at, what we're doing with the phosphorus, with the bags and so forth, and have those at those entrances, how much will that help it with the runoffs?
I couldn't say exactly what difference it's going to make. There's going to be calculations based on what they predict those things are going to soak up, how many kilograms of phosphorus per month and so forth. And then it doesn't take a lot to calculate how many kilograms of phosphorus are in the lake and look at how many kilograms of phosphorus that they say that those are going to soak up, and then calculate what your phosphorus content of the lake would be. And you can even calculate what your Secchi depth should change to. But how that's exactly going to play out and how accurate your calculations are going to be is going to be an open question probably till you guys do it.
Yeah, exactly.
It's going to be a try and see. I mean, calculations are great. Did it really operate the way that you thought it would? Did it operate better than you thought, or did it not make the difference?
Until we do it, we don't know
kinda,
what those results
yep,
are.
You kind of got to try and see. I assume they did math and they said, hey, this is going to make a significant difference to the lake. Yep. Okay. Yes.
Back to the plant life on the lake. I noticed this summer, different areas, there was lily pads growing, and then they started to die off. Is that an overspray in the lake, or is that contaminants in the lake that's killing the lily pads?
When they started to die off, what did they look like?
They just turned yellow and then brown.
Turned yellow?
And you've seen some roots floating on top of the water.
I think you may be just looking at natural changes where spatterdock or white water lilies will uproot and the rhizomes kind of break up and float around the lake. I think it's one of its strategies for reproduction and spread is the roots will come up, they'll break into these rhizomes. They're about that thick. You see them floating around the lake and float away. Sometimes you see reductions happen that way where the roots just uprooted, everything broke up and they moved out. Usually if you have secondary effects from a treatment, you will see the stems become elongated and kind of blow up like a bowl of spaghetti, and the plants look really odd, like they grew super fast for a day or two. And most of the time they don't die when you see that happen. They just look weird for a month or two, and then they're almost normal again by the end of the season.
Well,
So I doubt it was from the... That's the way they looked?
They started coming back towards the end of the season.
Yeah.
But I'm talking a pretty good sized area.
Well, it was a pretty good sized area. Was it along anybody's frontage?
What's that?
Was it along somebody's frontage, or was it just kind of off by itself?
Well, it's not really on the frontage. It used to go up to the frontage, but it's a big area.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I can't really think of a reason why someone would get in there and spray something like that. Someone could certainly spray or make it those secondary effects right along someone's frontage, you know, if they're paying to have their frontage treated, but it doesn't usually take them out. They usually survive, unless you're specifically targeting them.
Being a farmer, it kind of looked like they had sprayed because you had sunlight with the lily pads being above and collecting sunlight.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden they turn yellow and brown. And
Yeah. I don't know. I suppose someone could have snuck up in there and sprayed them.
it's just one of the things I've noticed this year.
Yeah. Usually if it's a side effect of the frontage treatments that went on, it's going to have to be pretty close to where they're treating to see much of an effect. If you get very far away, the products get so diluted that they're not really going to do anything to the lily pads.
Roundup is a contact spray that's been brought up earlier and getting into the water.
Yeah, glyphosate works if you spray them right on the leaves of
Right.
the lilies.
Mm-hmm. It's not.
If you don't spray it on the leaves and you just get it in the water, it doesn't do anything to the lilies. You
Right.
have to get it on the leaves so it can get soaked in.
But a lily is protected, isn't it?
Not necessarily. You can treat a limited amount of lilies right around your dock if they're right in your boating area and that kind of thing. You have to get a permit to do it. Going into a natural area that's not even along someone's frontage, I don't think you're going to get a permit to do that. They're going to deny that one in a heartbeat. Okay,
Does
we good?
temperature and heat affect that? Since it was a very hot summer with the lack of rain, yes, the roots are in water,
Yeah.
but if the water's not,
Maybe some.
okay,
Probably not very much.
just curious.
Things have a little bit more tendency to happen when everything's warm because everyone's physiology is going faster. So you might see more effect when it's hot, but I don't think it would be dramatic. Yes.
I want to summarize something, at least for myself, see if my thinking's clear. And it may sound like I have an agenda, but that's not my intent. It's clarity of understanding. So the conversation has been, I appreciate all the questions from that end of the room. I'm sorry, I couldn't see who was asking, but very holistic, small and big, everything adds up, right? And some of those things are short-term, some of those things are very long-term in nature. Going back to an earlier part of our conversation, and where I was asking, do we need to have reasonable expectations or not? You were suggesting that there are those extractions and suppressions, my terminology, maybe not yours, settle out or pull out via bags, for instance, that could have a more immediate impact. And that immediate impact, the timing of that is important, if I understand something else you said, by maintaining the seed bank. If we allow something to go on too long, we might not have the ability to naturally regenerate or regenerate in a quick enough fashion the natural species that exist. So should there be a priority in trying to make something happen quick?
Man, that's a tough call. I mean, it depends on what the budgetary resources are. I'm not going,
Well,
hey,
if I can interject there, obviously budget's always gonna be part of it, and I
Yeah.
don't mean to speak past that or take light of that. But again, I wanna balance that against expectations.
Right.
Such that, okay, the reality is, budget's not there, we can't justify it, but in light of that, let's have the appropriate expectations, right?
okay,
So, in a couple A-B comparisons of situations, something to try and jumpstart, albeit it has significant financial investment requirement. You can have potentially this type of impact in expectation for result. Absent that, your expectation should be this instead. And just so we all are on the same page as to, let's not go back and forth here. Understand we may see oscillation of things based on all the different variables that we already see, measuring from one time of year to another, 1 year to another. This is a long time thing. Let's just understand and have a reasonable and appropriate expectations. Right? So, does that make sense? What would be absent, again, I don't wanna sound like I have an agenda, but absent something to try and jumpstart clarity in a 2-year period, what is a reasonable expectation that we're gonna have a significant impact?
by following what steps, what you've currently got planned?
What we, well, even prior to what we've got planned, which is the
nutrient extraction.
Which is one of those jumpstart things. I
Yes.
understand that there's financial commitments being made.
So you're saying what can we see in the next 2 years with the course that we're on?
Right.
Can I,
Yeah,
I just wanted,
I'm not sure I'm being clear.
I'm lost.
I'm not exactly understanding
Okay.
what you're trying to point out, but the initiative that we funded at this point, and we funded next year's plan, is to do additional monitoring and analysis out on the lake to determine what the sediment level, phosphorus levels are. So we have a better understanding as far as recreational use on the lake and the importance of shoreline stabilization to try and stabilize that. If that's a huge issue, then we may need to really put some more teeth and more education. Not that education isn't important, but if we find out we have a lot of sediment in the bottom of the lake, then the recreational boating activities become very important as far as the impact upon anything that we're gonna do as far as the filters. And the plan right now is that we have in place is we've got over 300 filters
Yep.
that we've got funded to put into the lake. The idea behind that is we know we have a lot of phosphorus in the lake. If we didn't, we wouldn't have the level of algae that we have.
Yep.
So the idea behind the filters, and the filters have been successful in other lakes. We don't know what the results are gonna be at our place until we do it. But the idea is to put enough filters in the lake and concentrate them at those inlets, which we know are known input sources, to start to reduce the phosphorus levels. They're gonna physically remove phosphorus from the water to hopefully have an impact on our algae levels. If the algae levels drop, we increase our sunlight penetration, and then we get more vegetation growth.
Yep.
But
So-
all this stuff ties together.
Absolutely.
But to your
And
point-
I ended up saying a lot of words, and I'm sure lost the clarity of what I was trying to ask or communicate there. But one thing I wanna be clear about is this is not a criticism of what we've done, what we intend to do and so forth, and I'm highly supportive of what we're doing. I was just, again, looking at the overall expectations is what we should expect. And I was trying to contrast on my own mind between the, let's manage the inputs only versus some of the activity that I think of in terms of trying to jumpstart clarity and try and get the vegetation going. So it was just a matter of reasonable expectations, and the bags are one of those things that jumpstart.
The issues that Scott has presented to us this morning did not happen overnight. It's taken, I've been here 58 years, and it's taken 58 years to get to where we are today. We sure as hell ain't gonna get over it in 1 year.
We can see some,
But
we
we are
could see some
hoping-
positive impacts.
Hoping to see.
Additional.